Here we go. Recording in progress. We are very excited to have with us not only my friend, but it's so nice we had him twice. Already a second visit from Rabbi Yossy Gordon. Last time we spoke about his role as the director of Chabad on campus throughout the world. Tonight, he's joined us to discuss about a very special trip that he has just returned from. So, Rabbi Gordon, first of all, thank you. So happy to have you. Really appreciate it. And you've just returned from a trip to a place called Almaty. So my first question is, where is Almaty? Where is that?
Today, it's called, first of all, I'll say this, Shalom Aleichem, and very nice to be with you, Rabbi Epstein, and with this community. And as I've said, I believe the last time that I was together, how Rabbi Epstein and his family, his wife, Chaya, and I are from the same town, actually from the same street. And our families are very dear to each other. So Baruch Hashem, it's good for me to be able to be part of anything to do with the Epsteins. So now to your question. If you don't mind if I'm walking around, I'm actually in a hotel in Pittsburgh. So I just want to walk around here a little bit.
What's in Pittsburgh? You came for a Steelers game? What happened?
Actually, I just finished my tryout with the Steelers now. I'm set for Sunday. So I'm actually here for a good thing, for a simcha. So Baruch Hashem.
Beautiful.
So Almaty, today it's called Almaty, and it is located in Kazakhstan, which is a former Soviet republic. And it's close to the Chinese border, to the Mongolian border. And it's an interesting place. It's apparently fairly successful economically, especially now. And the people seem to be Mongolian, Chinese, when you look at them by appearance, but they speak Russian and they speak Kazakh, which is their language, which is similar to Russian. And it's a lot of trees, modern buildings, modern stores, as well as Soviet era construction. That's clearly from years ago. And I found it to be a friendly place. I found it to be a place where you felt safe. It wasn't a place that I felt in any way unsafe or vulnerable. And I wasn't there for that long, but it's my third time going there.
So what brings you to Almaty? What in the world possesses you to leave the confines of America with chocolate donuts everywhere to go to Almaty for a couple of days?
So Rabbi Epstein,
yes,
I don't know any of your community members that are here. I'm just looking to see the nice people that are here. Very nice. Well, I'm gonna answer you the way that I'm answering. If you would ask me this, if one of my children would ask me this question, would that be okay?
We'll be honored to be one of your children. If you teach us Torah, it's like you're a parent.
Okay.
Can I have $5? Can I borrow the car?
So I'm a chassid of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe is dear to me and beloved and cherished by me. And everyone connected to the Rebbe is beloved and cherished to me. A chassid is a person who seeks benefit, guidance, relationship, opportunity from their Rebbe. Most people find themselves seeking a Rebbe's involvement when they require a bracha, when they seek a blessing. And they have a need for something. So they go and they ask for a bracha, they ask for a blessing, which is fine. But really, truly, the relationship is far greater than blessing. And I'll give you an analogy based upon how we relate to Hashem. And it says in the Medrash that the way that we relate to Hashem is similar to how we should relate to Jewish leadership. And that is as follows, that if you look in the Mishnayos, the Mishnah in Oilus, in Masechta Oilus, in Tractate Oilus, articulates the limbs of the human body. And it articulates the spine, but it doesn't say the spine, it just says the vertebrae. And it says that there are 18 vertebrae, but it doesn't say anything about the spinal cord itself. So what's the reason? Because the spinal cord is far more than just a mere limb. It's the entire person. So too, when it comes to having a relationship with a tzaddik, with a Rebbe, going to a Rebbe for a bracha is what a person does in a very measurable, clear sort of way. Sort of like a mitzvah is a clear, measurable sort of relationship builder. Sort of like the way that a limb is a clear, measurable part of a person. But then there are things that we do that are beyond, so to speak, a clear, measurable sort of way. Clear, measurable mitzvah, a clear, measurable limb, a clear, measurable effort. And that is a relationship builder. That's beyond a measurable sort of way because it's the entire relationship. It's more than just that. Similar to the way that the spinal cord is far more than just a limb. So when a person wants to have a relationship with the Rebbe, with our Rebbe, with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, so we go to the Ohel, we write him a note, we try to do what he asks, we live life according to the way that he directed us to. And it's very, very important. And that's absolutely what must be done. But there are things that we can do that are beyond what seems to be the sensible approach that makes perfect sense. And there are things that we can do that are so powerful and so able to be felt in a true way that not necessarily can be counted amongst the directives that the Rebbe gave to us. But instead, it's an indication and it's a manifestation of a relationship. And that requires expense at times, as well as physical effort to move and go and travel. So for me, to go to this place, Almaty, the only reason that I went there is because that's the place where the Rebbe's father is interred after he passed away in 1944. And he was there, not because he was there by choice, but he was there because he was exiled by the Soviets. And the Rebbe was living here in America during that time and was never able to go to his father's grave. And even after the fall of the Soviet Union, he still wasn't able to go. And therefore, I feel as a chassid of the Rebbe, for me, as a measure of my relationship with the Rebbe, it's important to go to his father's grave on the day of his passing, on the day of his yahrzeit, and stand there and say some words of Tehillim, of Psalms, and seek in some way, some measure of, on one hand, solace, on one hand, relationship, on one hand, strength, on one hand, joy, and much more. And that's the reason why I went.
So here I put on the screen a picture that my friend sent me. This is, in fact, I hope you can read it. This is the gravesite of the Rebbe's father. And it says, here is interred the rabbi, the great genius of Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Reb Baruch Shner, who passed away on the 20th of the month of Menachem Av, which is last week when Rabbi Gordon and the group was there, in the year Tufshin Dalid, which amounts to 1944. So you went, you didn't go by yourself, you went with a trip. Do you know the origin of this trip? Who organizes it? When was the first time this trip went? Can you give us a little background as to how this opportunity came to you and how many people were on the trip? Give us a sense of that if you could.
So the answer is that about 15 years ago or so, there was a few people that went there, but there was shluchim, there was Chabad house in Almaty, probably well before that. But though there was a Chabad house there, outside of that community, few people would come to Almaty. And approximately 15 years ago, a friend of mine who lives in Florida went there and found it to be very powerful for him. And he spoke about it. And I always thought to myself, I'm going to go. And then 4 years ago, I was seeking some way to be able to, I feel like as if to enhance and deepen and further my relationship with the Rebbe. And I made a commitment to go. So I went 4 years ago before the pandemic, and I flew on Lufthansa, connected in Frankfurt. I went then to the Ohel, and from the Rebbe's grave, from the Rebbe, from his mother, and from the Rebbe, from the two of them, I went straight, in the Rebbetzin, I went straight to the airport, straight to the Rebbe's father. And I felt this is a way for me to serve in some way as like a bridge, so to speak, between the Rebbe and his father. And then after that, the following year after that, I wasn't able to go, but then last year I went and this year I went. And due to the pandemic, so what has resulted is there are those who today, as time goes on, become more and more interested and passionate about doing this. And we were able to charter a plane.
Wow.
And it was really great because
how many guys were on
so there was
plane?
it was an El Al Dreamliner, which if you're familiar with El Al, they retired the 747s. And now their major airplane they use for major long haul flying is a Dreamliner, which is a great aircraft. I think if I had to guess, there's probably about 48 in business somewhere along that, and then
I hope
a
you
little
said
less than that. No, there's
business.
three. It's a three-cabin aircraft. It's a three-cabin aircraft. It's economy, comfort, and business. But when you walk onto an El Al plane, and the flight attendants and everyone there are all speaking Hebrew, you're like already in a different place. You know what I'm saying? So it was fine.
So the
was really
whole
wonderful to
plane,
be there.
I just want to get the layout. The whole plane, this whole Dreamliner is filled with people. And where is it going from? New York, from Israel?
It was
just
New
give us
York
the
Almaty.
itinerary.
It's a New York Almaty nonstop. We
Nonstop.
departed nonstop. So the day of the yahrzeit, the day of the anniversary of the passing was on Thursday. We departed New York Tuesday night. We were wheels up at about 7.
So how many guys are on the plane, approximately?
I'm not sure, about 250.
Wow. And they're all just going for Almaty, just to go to the Rebbe's father's resting place.
Maybe there was I think there was one, maybe not. It could have been there was more than one air marshal. I'm not sure where they were going.
But I'm saying just a couple of stray cats. No, that guy said, isn't this going to Cleveland?
Yeah. But the air marshal, once they got on the plane, they saw who they're flying with. They were like, okay, we've got to, we don't need to really be so vigilant.
So you
right
got
now.
200 guys. They've come together.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to set this table here for one
about
purpose.
4 buses. It was about 4 buses.
Four
So how many
buses.
people
They
got
just
on?
want to go to daven at the Rebbe's gravesite for a few hours and then turn around and come back to New York. Is that accurate?
That's exactly what happened.
So no hotel, no swimming pool, no.
So there was a hotel.
Restaurant.
There was a hotel. There was a hotel available, and that was very, very nice. And there was actually a sponsor who was helpful for the hotel. So whoever wanted to could go. I actually found it to be very helpful because when you land, it was already evening. And we were going to be there till the next morning, late morning. So therefore, since we were on the ground for about 19 to 20 hours or so, it was okay to go to a hotel room and just rest for a few hours. Last year, when I went, I didn't go to the hotel. I just went straight there and that was it. But this time.
Now let me just get, let's say, so you land, there's an airport in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, they have airports.
Borat, and he welcomes you to Kazakhstan.
No, that didn't happen.
You get on a bus. How far away is the grave? I mean, it's not next door. I mean, you got to travel sometime, I imagine.
So it's
buses
not that
waiting when you get Ubers.
The buses.
I like to order
buses,
25 Ubers. I mean, how did this work? Just give us the feel.
It's a moderately developed country. There's buses and there's all sorts of ways of getting places. So I don't think that that's an issue. We had
how far away is
buses.
Almaty from where you landed? Far, an hour?
So I'm telling you, I think it was less than a half hour by bus, probably
okay.
even. Yeah, it wasn't that far.
All right, so you arrive there, and you all 250 of you just jam into this area.
So we first go to the Chabad house.
I'm going to share the screen. You sent me a video, and you talk. We'll just watch here, just a little feeling. But keep telling. So here, what are we watching here?
So this is actually right now what you're watching is the actual space where is found the grave, which is inside a cemetery that is not a Jewish cemetery, and there's a section which has some of the Jewish people some of the Jewish community that are buried there, but even that wasn't done properly. It's not respected. So there's a lot of non-Jewish graves interspersed amongst the Jews. Mm-hmm. And the Rebbe's father was, when the Rebbe's father passed away, they purchased several graves around him, which amazingly, that purchase was respected. You got to remember, he passed away in 1944. So throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, communism was brutal and there was such repression. Yet that grave was respected, and it wasn't people didn't bury others necessarily near him. There is one person who was very close to him. For whatever reason, that's how it ended up. But that's where you see inside this little structure that's been built around his grave, and that's what that video was.
So can you give us a little background about the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Yitzchak? What makes him so special? Obviously, he's the Rebbe's father. That is honor enough. But can you share with us a little bit, what was he doing in Almaty? How did he wind up there? What was a little bit of his story that maybe you could share with us for a few minutes and give us a sense of why it was so meaningful for 250 people to fly 20 hours to Kazakhstan to spend a few hours and pray at his gravesite?
So the Rebbe's father was a descendant of the third Rebbe of Chabad. And the Rebbe and his wife were cousins. Not very close cousins, but nevertheless cousins. And the last name was the same, Schneerson. The Rebbe's father was born in 1878, and he was considered to be one of the foremost Hasidim of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad. And they're very dedicated to him, to the point where the fifth Rebbe of Chabad said that I have three Hasidim that have given me purpose in my life. And one of them was the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe's father was known to be a great sage, a great scholar, a genius in many ways, in many areas of Jewish study, not only the revealed portion of Torah, but as well the hidden esoteric portion of Torah. And the Rebbe's father functioned as the leader of a community in Ukraine called, today it's known as Dnepropetrovsk, then it was known as Yekaterinoslav. And due to the fact that he was such a strong leader, he became the de facto leader of Russian Jewry after the departure in 1927 of the previous Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, our Rebbe's father-in-law. And he, for some amazing reason, other rabbis were arrested and done away with, exiled, left during the 20s, during the 30s. But the Rebbe's father was so respected by everyone, friend and foe alike, that he was able to remain at his post till 1939, which was an amazing feat.
It's 20 years after the revolution.
Exactly. Finally, in 1939, which is 12 years after the previous Rebbe left Russia, and he left against his will. The previous Rebbe was sent out of Russia by the Russians because they were afraid to execute him, frankly, and the story is known.
Yeah,
so they sent him out.
We had a class on it. We had a Wednesday night on it.
So 12 years go by, and the Rebbe's father, no compromise, never surrender under any circumstances, always standing up for what's right, and always leading, and always being vocal in public about a position that he holds to be important for the community to know about, without regard for personal danger, without regard for anything other than for what's right, stands guard and is leading his community like this all these years, and leading, in fact, so much more beyond just his community. Until finally, in 1939, before Pesach, on the 9th of Nisan, just 5 days before Pesach, he's arrested. And the reason he's arrested is because he had ensured that the Jewish community would have real kosher for Pesach matzah. And the Russian government said that they were ready to allow the Jews to bake matzah, but only if they would do so in a way that would guarantee that every matzah they bake is going to be used. Because if they don't, then it will cause loss to the state. And if you cause loss to the state, you're considered to be a counter-revolutionary, which would then, in those times, be a terrible crime. So he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm happy to facilitate the baking of the matzah, but I'm not going to be taking orders from anyone. And he traveled to see Kalinin, who was then the president of Russia, to get his permission, and he got it. He succeeded. But he created such an uproar with that the local KGB and the regional KGB, the regional secret police, and the regional Communist Party were so angry at what he had done that he couldn't survive that one. And he was arrested. And even when he was arrested, he was known in the prisons that he was in several. He was transferred from his prison in his hometown in the Yekaterinoslav, now known as Dnepropetrovsk, from there to Kharkov, back to Dnepropetrovsk, finally from there to Almaty. And they would try to get him to sign a confession, because the Russians, even though they had no qualms to summarily take a prisoner and execute them without any sort of investigation, but at times, especially high-profile prisoners, they would want them to sign a confession that was never legitimate. And he refused to sign. He was known as the rabbi who didn't sign. In fact, at times, he was even so, it was almost humorous. During one of his interrogations, they asked him, how did you manage to be able to succeed such a long time? What was your trick? How did you do it? Thinking that he's going to reveal some collaborator that he has. He says, I'll tell you the truth, he says, but you can't tell anyone. They go, yeah, what is it? He goes, I bribed Lenin. so, so anyway, so finally he's arrested in 1939, and it's Pesach, goes by, he has it written down, approximately 306 days, he counted it every day, and now it's Sukkot, and it's Hoshana Rabbah, before Simchas Torah, early AM in the morning, and he's summoned for his tribunal, where he's given a quick trial, 5 minutes, and sentenced to 5 years of exile. And he was sent to a place very remote in Kazakhstan, a place called Tsili, or Tsiali, where he was the only Jew. And this way he would be out of touch and he would be unable to communicate. And this way they didn't want to execute him for whatever reason. Perhaps they didn't feel that they had the institutional strength to go through such a, to do such a harsh punishment. But this way they'd at least be able to minimize him. And indeed, that's where he was for 5 years. His wife, the Rebbe Tzimchana, the Rebbe's mother, joined him on her own volition. And they struggled together and they succeeded in surviving. And they were there for 5 years. And finally, his sentence was over, but it was the middle of the war. So because it was the middle of the war, the Soviets said that no exile prisoners should come back to where they're from. They should remain in their place of exile. So he was allowed to move from his Tsiali, which was a terrible place, to go to Almaty, which was the nearest Jewish community. And that's where he came some months before, but he was already in a very bad way physically. And ultimately, he didn't live too much longer, just several months. And he passed away on the 20th of Av in August.
1944.
Yes.
1944. Wow. So what a fantastic trip. Rabbi, can you give us we don't mean to pry, can you give us a personal reflection about this trip? Maybe something that was particularly meaningful to you, something that you feel comfortable to share with us about, in a look back now, a week later, what this trip meant to you.
Rabbi Epstein, I gave you my entire story, why I went in the very beginning when you asked me.
But what did it live up to did it live up to your expectations? I guess that's the question. Did it strengthen your personal connection with the Rebbe? Did it give you, how did it pan out, as they say?
The whole reason for the trip was not to have personal expectations, but to be liberated from being, so to speak, limited by what I expect, but to be able to say, I've done this for the purposes that's not necessarily quantifiable and measurable in an expectation sort of way. But I'll tell you something that you asked me, so I'll tell you this. There's two things I'll tell you. And this is something that I've thought about when I've gone there in the past as well. And my father told me that when you go to a place of holiness, a place of sanctity, and you want to do something in a way that makes it sanctified and holy for you too, to experience it in some way, and you're not sure what to do, or for whatever it might be, the conventional wisdom of what to do, it doesn't quite sit with you. The thing to do is to say the entire book of Tehillim. So that's what I do when I go there. I take a book of Tehillim with me, and I say the entire book of Tehillim. And in chapter 55, at the end of the verse, the final verse, the words are Va'ani eftach bach, which means, and I trust in you. And I was saying those words, and I began to realize how this is truly the mantra, so to speak, if there's such a word that we can use in regard to this sage. But let's say the permeating theme of his life was his trust in Hashem, his trust in God. And we know there's a Hasidic melody that we sing on the 19th of Kislev that ends with Va'ani eftach bach. And I began to sing this melody standing over there, and I began to feel a certain sense of strength that comes from being in such a close proximity to an individual whose life was this sort of life, a life permeated with trust in God and never-ending faith and a never-ending commitment to being of service. And that's one. And the second thing that I'll share with you is that I always think about how I was present in 770 at the Rebbe's Hakafis, when the Rebbe would dance with us for Simchas Torah. And I thought about how so many decades this place was forlorn and dark. And in New York, it was bright and joyous. And one could think how sad it is for a person to have to pass away so far away from everyone dear to him, and then to remain there in this forlorn place, and everyone else seems to just forgotten and having a good time. And to me, there's a certain sense of sadness that could come in to my heart and from that sort of an approach. But then I realized something, and that is that there are 7 Rebbes of Chabad. Our Rebbe was the 7th Rebbe. Every other Rebbe raised their generation based upon how they saw their predecessor. No other Rebbe of the 6 Rebbes before our Rebbe conducted the Hakafas, the joyous celebration of Simchas Torah, the way the Rebbe did. They had celebrations, but never that way. And you remember Rabbi Epstein. Imagine a room with thousands and thousands of people in it, and everyone's united together with joy and with an overwhelming joy. And I realized that's what he learned, quite likely, from his father. And I realized how this is the source for the great joy that we've been experiencing all these decades. And that gave me a sense of strength, because this is where it's this is where certain things that we know to be today and that we love and cherish so much, this is where they're from. And indeed, I feel that that might be something that the Rebbe saw by his father, because I know that the previous Rebbe's celebrations on Simchas Torah were not that way. But this was something that we saw by the Rebbe. So I'm surmising that this is where he saw it. So that's a takeaway that I had, a little bit more personal for you to think about.
Well, Rabbi Gordon, Yossy, my friend, thank you so much for being with us. Safe travels back from Pittsburgh. And wow, it feels like we were there ourselves. And you shared that inspiration. So you absorbed and you gave, which is, of course, the Rebbe's most prolific lesson, that whenever a person learns, they have to share it with everyone else. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for giving us this. And we feel like we were there with you. So thank you. Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night for Parsha at 9:15. Thank you, Rabbi Gordon. I'll send out the recording. This was great. Beautiful. Appreciate it.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.